Introduction. The introduction to this story is 100% true. The story following the introduction is based off of the mystery of what was seen on Powder Plant Road. In the state of Alabama, there's a small city called Hueytown. It's home to many people and is near the better known city of Birmingham. It's a nice city, one that I'm happy to call my home. I have a rather large family here, and among the many members, most of the people that live in Hueytown are well known by at least one of the family members. One of my family members, my grandfather to be exact, knew a man that was a good friend of his. I won't say the man's name, but we'll call him John. John had lived in Hueytown all his life. He had grown up around the town and knew most of the people living in the city. Let's just say he had an encounter with something, but I cannot say what. Don't misunderstand it. If I knew, I would say, but the man never told exactly what it was he saw. Friends of his had their opinions, which varied from aliens to vampires. There were even a few suggestions of Sasquatch. Whatever it was enough to keep him off Powder Plant Road for the rest of his life. Powder Plant Road was a road that ran through a long stretch of forest. It was really twisted and was rather narrow. This road, unfortunately, is no longer in use. It was replaced by a bigger road that passes straight through the woods, as opposed to twisting. Hotels, restaurants, and grocery stores have stolen the land the large forest was once inhabited, and making the odds of whatever he saw still living in the little portion of woods left unharmed really slim. This man drove this road every day on his way to and from work, it being the quickest means home. Whatever he saw that night was enough to make him take a 20-minute detour every day and night. The worst part is, he never told anyone what he saw, only that he saw something on the road, but he wouldn't give any detail. This was many years ago, and he had not told his wife, children, grandchildren, cousins, siblings, or anyone what he had seen prior to his passing. No one knows what it was he saw. Ever since my grandfather told me this story, I was immediately interested. I've always been interested in the theory of monsters and such. For example, ever since I heard about the Slender Man, I have been nearly obsessed with it, wanting to hear every report and see every picture of him that I could. Not that I necessarily believed that he was real, just that I was naturally interested in things like that. I'm rambling, but back to the story. Once I heard about this story, I had to learn everything about it. Of course, the man who had claimed to see this thing was gone. My mom knew his daughter, luckily, and was able to get in touch with her. She was given an address, and a couple days later, I went to the house. I asked about the sighting, and she looked at me like I was insane. "What are you talking about?" she asked me, and I sighed. This is when I first realized that he hadn't told anyone, and given that he hadn't told his own family, I assumed that he hadn't told anyone at all. Never mind. Did your father have any type of journal, something he kept records or thoughts in? I asked, praying that she would say yes. She looked puzzled, and I knew she was wondering why I was asking for personal information on her father. My mom, I know you're friends with him. Her dad was really good friends with him. I was just wondering about a story that she told him. That's the reason I need information. I was just curious. I said this and didn't realize how stupid I sounded until the last of the word left my lips. "Oh," she said, I'll be right back, excuse me." The smile grew on my face as I realized that I could have a lead on the story. A few minutes later, she returned with a dusty book in her hands. "Here, this was a journal of his. After he passed, I never troubled myself with reading any of his writings. They would just have made me depressed." "Thank you," I exclaimed. "I'll bring it back to you. Keep it." "It would only gather dust here anyway," she interrupted. I thanked her again, happy that I had found a lead on this mystery and had been troubling me for years, and returned home. I might actually find out what John had seen all these years ago. When I arrived at my house, I quickly walked inside and sat down at my desk. I opened the journal and began to read. I was struck with disappointment. This was not a diary or journal, or even a memoir. It was simply a list of everyday activities, almost like a checklist. Pick up AA batteries, pick up clothes from dry cleaning, bring home dinner for the family. It was all completely useless to me. I began flipping through the pages quickly now, scanning each page briefly for a glimpse of something interesting. I noticed that there was something strange about these pages as they progressed. The handwriting was getting noticeably sloppy, as if he was rushing through the pages. I continued, and I finally found something of use. I would have been happy having found something that could be an answer to my questions, but instead I was swept over by a sense of dread. On the pages closer towards the end, there were holes in the page. Not large holes, but the type of shreds it makes in the paper if you bear down really hard with a pen. This was not the only obvious difference in the pages. There were scribbles on the corners of the pages where the to-do list hadn't reached. Most of the words were too sloppy to make out, but I did understand one word, which was written in almost flawless handwriting. He watches. This made the hair on my neck stand up. He watches, I thought. What does that mean? I assumed it was about the creature he'd seen, but it was written so strangely. It had been traced over and over again on the following pages, causing the words to grow very messy and scribbled, even the ink bleeding through the pages behind it. Whatever he had seen, it had him quite nerve-wracked. I continued reading the pages and found that the rest of the pages were filled with the words, "He watches," over and over again in different sizes, fonts, some upside down, some written backwards in the way you would have to look at it through a mirror to read it. I didn't understand. If he had been so scared, why hadn't he told somebody, or called the police or something? Maybe he thought they would think he was crazy, or just not believe him. I finished flipping through the pages and tossed the journal onto my desk, trying to make thought of what I had just read. On impact, the book slid off of my desk and onto the floor. When it landed, the corner of a small piece of paper revealed itself from the inside of the cover of the book. Whatever this paper was, it was not supposed to be seen. I picked up the book and slid the paper out of the cover. It was a sheet from the book, but it had been torn out and folded to fit inside the cover of the book itself. I opened the piece of paper and read it. Dear reader, if you are reading this, then I am more than likely gone. The reason of my passing is not of any importance, and for your safety, do not look into it. However, if you have come as far as to find this note, you're most likely doing the exact opposite. The writings in my journal were not meant for anyone's eyes but my own, and you must understand why. I have seen something that I wish I hadn't. I know not when I will see it again, but that I will. Whatever it is not of this earth. I have pondered what it could have been. I believe it's a demon of some sort, but hopefully by now, I've scared you off and put an end to any thoughts of searching for this creature that you had prior to this note. But if I haven't, then I will warn you again. Do not search for this beast. It is not worth the risk. Curiosity killed a cat, and for good reason. There are certain things that are better left unknown, things that are not meant for humans to have knowledge of. These things are unknown to mankind, unknown to science, which we are not aware of. These creatures lurk in the dark, keeping them from being discovered. You may ask how they have lived among us for so long without being seen, how they've managed to go on for so long without being discovered. They haven't. No, not just I, but others have seen them too. Have you heard the stories of people going missing in the woods? Deaths of natural causes, starvation, dehydration, heat stroke. Some of the losses have been blamed on kidnappers or murderers, but I know better now. These are all victims, poor individuals that have seen what I have seen, and they have been stopped from telling of these creatures. They are all over the world, an entire species that hasn't been discovered because they kill everyone that knows about them. I know they will come for me as well, so I write this as a warning to whoever may read this. Don't look for them. Forget about what I've said, what you've learned, forget everything, and return to your normal life. I only hope this knowledge doesn't lead to the same fate that undoubtedly awaits me. Farewell. My heart was racing, my brain was trying to absorb everything that I had just read, and I felt slightly sick. I had a horrible headache, and I went to the kitchen to get some medicine. As I reached for the bottle in the cupboard above the window, I could have sworn I saw something move far off in the woods. A cold shiver ran down my spine as all the thoughts of demons and monsters scrambled my brain. I took a deep breath and peered into the trees where I had last seen it disappear. That's when I saw it. It dashed out of the trees, barreling across my yard. Oh dear. I sighed in relief as my heartbeats began to slow and I began to reclaim my cool. I was getting all worked up over nothing. Even if what John had seen was real, I haven't seen anything, so why would I be in any danger? I laughed at my extreme paranoia, walked into my room, and went to sleep, looking forward to some much-needed rest. I was being chased. I was in the forest, darting between trees and bushes as I dashed through the woods. Behind me I heard the roar of my enemy, and I could tell it was gaining on me. I could hear its enormous feet barreling through the bushes, knocking over trees as it bounded after me. I wasn't fast enough, my feet were cut, it hurt to run on. I turned back to look behind me and looked forward just in time to see a rock beneath my foot. I tripped, crashing through the woods as it plummeted down the steep slope of the forest. I landed with a thud, stood up, and was thrown to the ground by a pain rushing up my leg. It was broken. Great, I thought, cursing my inevitable bad luck. I searched my surroundings for shelter and found a gaping black mouth covered slightly by kudzu from a nearby tree. A cave. I crawled into the cave, dragging my limp leg behind me like a child would pull a stuffed animal on a leash. I made it inside, and just in time, as I heard the beast's footstep come closer, and then cease. I knew he was right above me now, and and I tried my best to keep quiet despite the excruciating pain in my leg. I started to slowly inch my way deeper into the cave, thinking that if it looked into the cave now, I would be in plain sight. I couldn't hear the beast anymore and prayed that it had ran off, thinking that I was still running, but somehow I knew that it was much too smart for that. I continued scooting deeper into the cave, and as I was about to stop, moving backwards, my hand hit something. I felt like a root from a tree or a branch of some sort. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, planning on using it as a light source. I clicked the on button and focused my eyes on what lay beside my hand. It was a bone. I trembled at the thought of what predator lived in this hole, and when it would be coming back to see another living creature dwelling within its home. I began to examine the bone, and a deep dread swept over my body, and a cold sweat broke out on my neck. This wasn't the bone of an animal. I had taken some health classes, and there was no doubt that this was a tibia. Whatever lived in this hole, it was hunting humans. I decided to go farther back, wanting to see if this beast was in the cave or not. I made sure that I was being silent in the process so that I wouldn't wake the animal if it were sleeping. If this animal was hunting humans, I definitely did not want to disturb it. As I inched backwards, I realized that there were an increasing number of bones lying within the cave, and I guessed I was getting closer to the den. Suddenly, the heavy silence was broken by an odd rattling sound. I must have kicked a bone with one of my legs. I clicked my phone and see where the bone was. Instead, I saw nothing but dirt. I hadn't touched the bone. I heard it again and realized the sound was coming from behind me towards the mouth of the cave. Whatever lived here, it was coming back. My heart began to beat quickly as I crawled as fast as I could down the cave. As I was crawling, a large rock met contact with my broken leg, and an overwhelming wave of pain crashed over my body. I squealed, and as soon as I had, I heard a deep roar thundered throughout the cave, transforming my hearing into a muffled ringing. This was no animal, and the reality of the situation hit me like a ton of bricks. This was the home of the beast. I no longer felt my leg, the adrenaline had kicked in by now. I crawled as fast as I could, knowing the beast was catching me. The darkness of the cave was overwhelming, and I was dashing in the dark, not able to see a foot in front of my face. I turned back to look behind me, knowing I wouldn't be able to see the beast, even if he was riding on my back. Before I had time to turn back around, the hard wall of the cave met with my left shoulder, and I slammed into it. I felt all around me and realized that I had reached a dead end. Sweat dripped down my face as I cowered in the corner, and as I heard the roar of the beast, now much closer, I sprang up and nearly fell onto the floor. I wiped my face, reached over, and grabbed for a nearby chain. I pulled it, heard the familiar click, and light poured into my dark bedroom. I looked at my alarm clock. It read 3 a.m. How ironic, I thought to myself as I pulled back the covers of my bed and let my feet rest on the cold floor. My head was clear, though my heart was still racing from the dream. I went downstairs and got a glass of water, sitting down at my dining room table. I sat, quenching my thirst, and stared out the window. I knew that demons could speak to you through dreams, and that 3 a.m. was prime time for demons to be active. Through all of my creepypasta and scary story pursuing, I had learned quite a bit of these supernatural things. I sat and thought over the warnings I had heard in the journal. The reason of my passing is not of any importance, and for your safety, don't look into it. Do not look for the beast, it's not worth the risk. Curiosity killed the cat, and for good reason. There are certain things that are better left unknown, things that are not meant for humans to have knowledge of. Forget about what I've said, what you've learned, forget everything. I only hope that this knowledge doesn't lead you to the same fate that undoubtedly awaits me. The glass fell out of my hand, shattering on the floor and sending glass everywhere. I got out of my chair and leaped over the glass, but misjudged and landed on it, pushing sharp pieces of broken glass into the bottoms of my feet. I didn't care. I quickly pulled them out and ran upstairs and snatched the note that was hidden in the journal upstairs and began reading it. Have you heard the stories of people gone missing in the woods? Deaths of natural causes, starvation, dehydration, and heat stroke. Some of the losses have been blamed on kidnappers or murderers, but I know better now. These are all victims, poor individuals that have seen what I have seen, and they have been stopped from telling of these creatures. It knew. Whatever John was talking about knew that I had knowledge of it and was after me. The dream, 3 a.m., it was telling me that it knew. I had been discovered. I cursed at the journal and slung it off the desk and onto the floor. I wasn't going to sit around and wait for this beast to slaughter me. If it was going to kill me anyway, I was going to at least put up a fight. I walked down to my basement and opened up the door leading to the room in the back. I tapped the light switch and the lights flickered on. I walked over to the case, opened it, and retrieved the item from the holder. I walked through the woods, shotgun in hand, searching for anything that may look suspicious. I took a step forward and a sharp pain shot through my foot. I looked down and remembered the glass and realized that in the commotion of preparing for battle, my mind was racing and I forgot to put on shoes. It was too late now. I was already deep in the woods. I'd driven up to the entrance to where Powder Plant Road used to be and parked my car there. I had walked in on the road until I was roughly at the middle of the woods, stepped off the road, and into the forest. I didn't know where I was, but just that I was in the same woods that John had been when he saw the beast. I was walking when I noticed the woods were completely silent. It felt as if you could cut the silence with a knife, and it was unnaturally dark. I continued walking, and after a few minutes I realized that my footsteps were being echoed. I stopped, and they did as well. I assured myself that the silence was getting to me, and began walking again. After a couple seconds, however, the echo continued. I was sure something was behind me, but no matter how many times I stopped, the echo stopped as well. I came up with a plan. I would walk for a couple minutes, and then take an abnormally large step, throwing off the rhythm of my walking, and hopefully throwing off whatever was attempting to copy my steps. I walked for a while, and then jerkily made a large stride with my left leg, raised it up to my waist, and slowly putting it back down, as my foot was about level to my other knee. My heart skipped a beat as I froze in place. My foot had yet to hit the ground. I rolled around and fired off 2 shots, sending shotgun pellets flying into the trees and through bushes as they punctured the heavy air. As the pellets flew through the air, I heard the sound of them slipping in the flesh, followed by a deep growl. I knew that I had found the beast. I ran. I was unaware of how bad I had injured the beast, but I knew I had hit it. I prayed that I had killed it, though I was sure it wouldn't be that easy. I ran through the woods and cut direction, sprinting towards where I thought I'd left my car. I soon heard the thundering footsteps behind me, and I knew it was back. I was being chased. I was sprinting full speed, darting between trees and bushes as I dashed through the woods. Behind me I heard the roar of my enemy, and I could tell it was gaining on me. I could hear its enormous feet barreling through the bushes, knocking over trees as it bounded after me. I wasn't fast enough. My feet were cut, and it hurt to run on. I turned back to look behind me and looked forward just in time to see a rock underneath my foot. I tripped, crashing through the woods as I plummeted down the steep slope of the forest. I landed with a thud, stood up, and was thrown to the ground by the pain rushing up my leg. It was broken. Great, I thought, cursing my inevitable bad luck. I looked on the ground and saw my shotgun lying next to where I had landed. I grabbed it and slung it over my shoulder. I searched my surroundings for shelter and found a gaping black mouth covered slightly by kudzu from a nearby tree. A cave. I crawled into the cave, dragging my limp leg behind me like a child would pull a stuffed animal on a leash. I made it inside, and just in time, as I heard the beast's footstep come closer and then cease. I knew he was right above me, and I tried my best to keep quiet, despite the excruciating pain in my leg. I started to slowly inch my way deeper into the cave, thinking that if it looked into the cave now, I would be in plain sight. I couldn't hear the beast anymore and prayed that it had ran off, thinking I was still running, but somehow I knew that it was much too smart for that. I continued scooting deeper into the cave, and as I was about to stop moving backwards, my hand hit something. It felt like a root from a tree or a branch of some sorts. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, planning on using it as a light source. I clicked the on button and focused my eyes on what lay beside my hand. It was a bone. Memories of my past dream came flooding in as I realized that what I had experienced wasn't a dream, but my fate. I decided to go farther back, making sure to stay silent. As I inched backwards, I realized that there were an increasing number of bones lying within the cave. Suddenly, the heavy silence was broken by an odd rattling sound. I knew what it was this time. My heart began to beat quickly as I crawled as fast as I could down the cave. As I was crawling, a large rock met contact with my broken leg, and an overwhelming wave of pain crashed over my body. I squealed, and as soon as I had a deep roar thundered throughout the cave, once again transforming my hearing into a muffling ringing. I no longer felt my leg, the adrenaline had kicked in by now. I crawled as fast as I could, knowing the beast was catching me. The darkness of the cave was overwhelming, and I was dashing in the dark, not able to see a foot in front of my face. I crawled forward and began to swipe my hand in front of me, trying to find the back of the cave, and I was met with a hard wall of the cave. I felt all around me, praying that my dream had been wrong, that I would find another tunnel, but all I felt was the cold wall of the cave. Sweat dripped down my face as I cowered in the corner, and as I heard the roar of the beast, now much closer, I pulled my shotgun off my back and reloaded it. I pulled out my phone and threw it down the cave, and was relieved to see that the screen landed facing upwards. When the light was blocked off from the screen, I would begin shooting. I was amazed to see how large this cave was, and I knew that the beast must be extremely tall. I waited as I heard the beast barreling down the cave after me, and I knew that any second it would be here. The light of my phone vanished, and I opened fire. I shot twice and reached for the shells in my pocket. The bullets were obviously doing some damage because the light of my phone returned, telling me that the shots had sent the beast staggering back. My gun was now reloaded, and I aimed forward, waiting for the light to vanish again. This time it took a while. I watched the tunnel, finger on the trigger, and waited. I saw a dark shadow slowly moving over the light, and my blood turned cold. It was a large paw, resembling a bear's but with much larger claws, curling from the base of the paw. They were razor sharp on the tips. I waited for the shadow to move slightly closer, and then shot again. The Gunshots rang out and I quickly reloaded again. The light on my phone returned, and I aimed forward, waiting for the beast to come back. This time I heard it moving. The sounds of its booming steps echoed throughout the cave, and I could tell it was running in the opposite direction. I had scared it off. I listened as the echoing got quieter and quieter, and realized that my ears were still ringing, and were getting louder. I felt my head get light, and collapsed onto the floor of the cave. I woke up in the hospital. I looked out the window and saw the ground roughly 4 floors down. A cast hid my leg, and I could tell that they had already performed surgery. I lay there, trying to remember what all had happened. As the memories slowly came back to me, I tried to get out of the bed and was stopped by a voice from the left of me. "I wouldn't do that," it said. I jerked my head to the left, startled, and saw a man dressed in the regular hospital outfit, sitting with a clipboard in his lap. How did you find me?" I stuttered, confused. You were brought in here 3 weeks ago. The police found you inside of a cave in the middle of the woods near Powder Plant Road. The search party was looking for you and found a large blood trail leading to the cave. They said it was more blood than was natural for a human being, so they found you unconscious at the end of the cave, with a broken leg, bloody feet, lying with a shotgun. They assumed an animal had chased you in there, though they didn't know of any animal that could have bled so much. They brought you in here, and we found that you were in a coma. We proceeded with surgery and waited for you to come back. This is the first time we've seen you awake in 3 weeks. I had been unconscious for 3 weeks. I lay there thinking about everything the doctor had told me, and jumped, scaring the doctor. "Are you okay? Where are the police?" I interrupted. "Did they find anything out? Did they search my house? What did they do after they dropped me off here?" I was panicking. If they had read the journal at my house, they would be in danger as well. They could have told people. The whole town could be in danger. "I don't know about your house. I do know that after they dropped you off, they took a blood sample to the nearby research facility. They said they couldn't find a match for the blood, and that there was no animal known to mankind that had this blood. What attacked you that night?" The doctor looked puzzled, and had an odd look on his face, a mixture of curiosity and fear. "You listen to me, and you listen to me good. Do not search for this animal. It's not worth the risk." The words flowed from my lips like water over rocks, and I found myself quoting John's warning letter. "Curiosity killed the cat, and for good reason. It may be too late for me, I don't know, but I cannot stress this enough. Do not look into this case. Don't look for this animal. Forget about what I've said, what you've heard. Forget everything and return to your normal life. Do you understand?" The doctor looked frightened and simply nodded his head. "Good. Now can you bring me a phone? I need to make a call to the police department," I said, lying back down. "Yes, one second," he spoke in a trembling voice and left the room. He returned shortly with a cell phone, handed it to me, and left the room again. I dialed the number for the police department, and a woman picked up. "Hello, 911, what's your emergency?" she quoted. "Were you with the search party that found a man in the back of the cave?" I asked, praying that she was. "Yes, I was with the party. Who is this?" She sounded slightly uneasy, and I didn't doubt that she was confused as to who was calling and why they were calling the police department about a search party that happened 3 weeks ago. "You listen to me, and you listen to me good." I told her the same thing I had told the doctor, and she had the same frightened vibrato in her voice when she replied. "Sir, I don't know what you're talking about. Who are you?" she repeated. "I'm the man that they found, and I'm trying to save your lives. Did anyone find anything odd about what happened that night?" I was shaking, praying that no one had found anything about the beast. "Some of the men from the search party went to your house the next day. They found an old journal and a note talking about some demon that lived in the woods or something, but that's all. What do you mean about saving our lives?" My heart stopped. They had read the note. They knew. And so did it. "How many people have read the note?" I asked sternly, ignoring the question. Anyone that knew about this was as good as dead, and I prayed again that the policeman hadn't told anyone about what had happened. The lady paused and began to speak. "Well, there were only 4 policemen who went to your house, but the press got a hold of the story. They wanted to know what animal the blood was from. They put the story on the national news." My heart shattered to pieces as I realized the Armageddon I had led our species to. I replied with a hoarse voice, not knowing to whom my words were directed towards, be it the policewoman or myself. "So everyone knows." I dropped the phone. I didn't want to hear any more. I looked out my window and noticed a black shadow standing just outside of the forest. It stood there on all fours, staring at me. After minutes of eye contact, slowly turned and walked back into the forest.